Hey, everybody. It's that time again. We're having a new episode of the Slow Flowers podcast. I'm Deborah Prinzing, and I'm so excited today to introduce Brooke Palmer of Jenny Creek Flowers. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. You bet. We've been talking about this for a long time. And yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about. It's very timely because you recently authored a column for the Slow Flowers Journal, and I'll show that on the screen in a little bit. That's going to dive into your favorite topic of the year, winter tulips. But first of all, tell us where Jenny Creek Flowers is and a little bit about your farm. It looks like you're cold. You're wearing a very cute Carhartt hat, hot pink. I love it. Where
Thank
are
you.
you?
Yeah. So Jenny Creek Flowers is in upstate New York. The kind of closest town is Ithaca. Other nearer places would be Rochester or Syracuse. So I'm right in the Finger Lakes region. It's really beautiful, and there's a lot of agricultural heritage around here. I grew up around here, but I actually lived out in the Pacific Northwest for about 20 years. So I got my start in flowers out there. But when we moved back home here, we bought an old farmstead, and there's a little at the corner of it, there's a little old hayfield. And it was like the moment that I saw that hayfield, this flower farm just kind of came to life in my mind, and I could not be stopped. So
Wow.
I actually built it the first 3 years. I was a high school teacher, so I was teaching high school and building my farm on the side. And now, just as of June, I'm in full-time flower farming. So it's
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's like a perfect model to talk about too, is people go all in, liquidate their 401ks and spend all this money to become a flower farmer. But sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And it sounds like you were a little bit more organic and methodical, I guess, to do it in a way that you could sustain and wouldn't, put you in debt. Is that a good explanation?
That's what I was trying to do. I mean, like I said, I had gardened for a really long time, so I knew that I loved that aspect of it. But the aspect of selling and marketing flowers was all new. Doing things on kind of production level was new. And so I felt like I needed to give myself some time to make sure that I really loved it. And in spite of 12, 14-hour days for 3 years, that was really rough, but I loved it. And I didn't want to let it go. So I definitely recommend. I think flower farming is a great side hustle. And there's a lot of models where people do just like one thing at small scale, and you can kind of let your business grow over time.
What were you teaching, Brooke, at high school?
I was 10th grade English teacher. And it was actually it was my favorite years of teaching were my last couple of years. It was really lovely, actually.
When you went back to New York.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can picture like the long days coming home at 4 or something and trying to get a little bit of farming done. But then your summers, I guess, really allowed you to, have the freedom of not teaching during the key months when you needed to be tending to the fields.
Yeah, absolutely.
So describe the space. Like, how big is your farmstead, and what infrastructure do you have? Just sort of help people understand the scale of your operation at Jenny Creek.
Well, our farmstead's over 40 acres, which is massive. I'm still a very small scale farm. I've got about 1.5 acres fenced in with a 8-foot deer fence. So that's kind of like my permanent growing space. And then within that, I've got a pretty large peony field. I've got my annual fields, which about half of that goes to dahlias. And then I also have 2 high tunnels that I got about a year and a half ago through the USDA High Tunnel Grant. So those are those really big 30 by 96 tunnels, and they've really been a game changer.
I just had lunch with another Slow Flowers member here in Seattle yesterday, and we were talking about her interest in applying for the High Tunnel Grant, and she was like, I don't need a 60 by 90 or, whatever size. She's like, I just need about half that size, but USDA does not offer like a mini high tunnel. Did you have
That's true. Yeah.
You had to just go with the one individual, the specific size.
They do have some recommendations. And then by the way it works out is it was something like to get a smaller tunnel, the grant wouldn't even cover it. There was just something about like making it worth it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't planning to get two, but I just haphazardly found out when my grant got approved. She said, well, the money's so good that so many farmers are asking for two. And I said, well, how does that work? And she said, do you want two? And I went for it. So
Wow.
it's a bigger covered growing space than I really need for my production level, but I'm really happy to grow into it over time.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like you have more capacity than to expand.
I do.
That's really interesting.
And the other thing, though, my most profitable and productive growing space, though, is actually in my cellar. So I grow my tulips. I force the tulips into bloom. I have a dirt floor cellar. Part of my house is 1806, and the other part is like 1830s. And, you know, it's kind of stone walls and dirt floor. And then that's where I'll turn over about 22,000 tulips this winter.
Good. Well, I can just picture it, but I hope you share some photos so we can put them in the show notes. Before we jump into the tulip conversation, I want to just ask you a couple other questions about your path to flowers. So you lived in Portland for a long time. Were you exposed to the cut flower industry in Portland, or was it more of just a garden? Because it's a great gardening town.
I was a gardener, and it's called the City of Roses. So roses were my gateway flower. I grew the roses, and then I started to grow other things. And we had a corner lot. So I just got, you know, that's what I did all summer. And then it was just lovely. And then as the pandemic hit, that's where I kind of had this shift from wanting veggies to flowers. And so I decided, well, what if I just grow flowers and I pay a veggie farmer? So I did that. And then that was how, when we moved here, but I wasn't doing any of that commercially. It was just because they made me feel really good. Wow. And then when I moved here, that's where I knew I wanted more flowers in my life.
Well, you radically changed your lifestyle for your family. You have a child, right?
I do. Yeah. He's 14.
Okay. Is he helping you now?
He helps in the summer. It's fantastic. Yeah. And he does things that I don't like to do. Like he'll fill the cistern and he'll dump all the like wheelbarrow loads or move the arbor mulch. So yeah, it's really, he'll go close the tunnels if it's cold. Yeah. And I'm like, can you go do it? And he'll run off and do it.
and that driver's license is coming pretty soon, and you'll put that to work. Well, what got us going on this conversation about your sort of new, I guess, season extension with winter tulips is you had emailed me when we knew each other because you took the Slow Flowers creative writing course, I think. Yep. And you should have been teaching it. You're an English major, you know? I forgot about that. You're a great writer. And that's when I said, okay, you took the course. I know you can write. Why don't you write about this for the Slow Flowers Journal? And that is out just this week, and we'll share the link in our show notes. And it's a free issue of the fall edition of Slow Flowers Journal. But we have a column called The Business of Flowers, and you kind of turned our conversation and your story that you shared with me into a really inspiring piece about how do you make some decisions that align with your values. I was kind of surprised when you said, if I grow winter tulips and I force them, am I still legitimately, can I call myself a Slow Flowers practitioner? And it really gave me a good chance to even think about it. And, you know, the answer is yes. We believe so. You and I do. So talk a little bit about how this came about and what led you to this. You describe your annuals, your dahlias, your roses. All of those are like in-ground, crops, right? Mm-hmm. And then this opportunity to grow in the winter came along. And tell me a little bit about how that came together.
Well, I went looking for it. Okay. As I share in the article, I have a friend who's like, I really just want your winter flowers. You know, we get like 20 degrees steady for weeks on end here. We get this really low, heavy gray environment. It's not a lovely place to winter, really. And so I found the Tulip Workshop, and it was like the moment that I found it and read about it, I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. And so I went off to Vermont and I got the training, which I highly recommend anybody really take that route rather than, kind of learning on your own. And it was really successful, and I grew beautiful tulips and people loved them. And it was just this incredible thing. But then after a couple of seasons, I sort of had this question in the back of my mind. Like it felt like I was starting to go all in on these tulips being the real specialty offering that I had. And I had to really consider this question. Like, I thought I was growing local, seasonal, sustainable flowers. And what I had to really make sure of was that if I'm not growing seasonal flowers, like, am I okay with that? Right. So I came to that
Mhm.
question of, does local sort of outweigh this notion of seasonal, when in so much of our continent we really can't bring flowers into bloom naturally in the wintertime.
Right, right. I mean, look at this photo that I just popped up the column on winter tulips. Brooke, that is, it is just, oh my gosh, it's magic to see the armloads of vivid color in your, that you're holding in a snowy field. I mean, this must just be a dream for people when they see your tulips in the cold winter months.
It really is, it's like, and it's like, I have like these love notes on my bulletin board above my office space where people just send me messages like, I had no idea. And you can't imagine how these tulips get me through the winter. And I used to feel a certain way in the winter. And now I feel like I have this thing to look forward to. And my house is so beautiful with them. And so, I mean, we know, like, we're all with slow flowers because we know the power of flowers, but I think winter flowers have something that's even a bit more special because they're so out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and I've kind of had this conversation a lot, especially since we have some sponsors who are promoting bulbs, and most bulbs are coming out of Europe,
Mhm.
and there really isn't a market for bulb production anymore in North America that I'm aware of. I know here in Washington State there used to be, and Oregon too. Oregon used to have a lily bulb industry. Washington State, there is a somewhat of a tulip bulb industry, but it's a little bit more for like tourism up in Skagit Valley. So the bulbs already have to travel here to be grown and become local flowers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one conversation, one part of the conversation. But your conversation or your questioning of it had more to do with um, I think like the amount of energy you were using, and the fact that seasonal, they were artificially grown. I guess they
Yeah,
weren't naturally
yeah,
grown.
absolutely. Yeah, and yes, and so then you look at that, like, like what you said, anyone who grows a bulb here imports the bulb. I mean, we all are doing that, but anybody who buys imported blooms is kind of buying into that carbon footprint of not only there's the import freight, all of that aspect, but then you get into these kind of unknown or unwanted environmental risks that impact the health of farm workers, and looks at like what goes on to imported flowers, to protect them from pests and things like that. So there's kind of like that whole dark side of
Mhm.
the floral industry that I know we don't love to talk about, but it's absolutely there. And then that's where I, had the kind of got re-inspired, where these tulips are just allowing me and my community to put that whole issue aside and offer people the local option. And the reality is that the people, my customers, want flowers and they want them all year. And I think that's probably true for any flower farmer. They're going to pick the local option if they can have it. So that's really what's so amazing about having a forcing tulip program, is that I'm able to provide that, and people definitely want the local blooms.
Well, it's such a special niche for you too, because you're not really. What are you competing with? You're competing with, I guess, Canadian or Dutch
Mm-hmm.
tulips that have been had to have a long transportation
Yep.
journey. I mean, days, not weeks or anything, but they're not as juicy and delicious and sort of. You've got the specialty varieties, as
That's
I
right.
see in your
Yeah.
arm,
So it's like,
right?
it's the varieties. It's definitely going to be the vase life, right? Just, I mean, tulips last long, but being shipped takes away some of that vase life. Absolutely. And it's the varieties, it's the freshness. I mean, there's a lot of days where I harvest in the morning and those tulips are like on someone's table by dinner, right? So it's
Wow.
just such a quick turnover. The stems are moving pretty quickly here. Um, and it's also, it like creates this ritual now for people where it's part of their like Tuesdays during the winter. I stop by the bakery and I get my loaf of bread and my tulips, and I go next door to the wine shop, and there's this kind of like European vibe to it that people are growing to really love and appreciate, that they have this ritual and something. And usually while the next bouquet comes in, the old vase still has a little bit of life in it, so their house ends up just full of flowers.
I love it. And I want to apologize. There's a very strong wind right now that is blowing through Jenny Creek Farm, and so we're getting a little bit of muffling sound from the wind. But we'll try to knock it back on editing. I can still hear you, and
Okay.
so yeah. Walk us through the calendar, Brooke. Like how? Okay, first of all, maybe I should back up. Not everybody has a dirt floor basement, so
That's right.
that's a bonus for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. I know some other Tracy Yang from John Co, who's a Slow Flowers member here in Washington State. I know she's growing like in the lower level of her house, so
Mhm.
it's not always. Not everybody has a basement, but there are other conditions or environments that tulips can be forced. But that set aside, when you started this, did you immediately think, oh, I can do this in the basement? Or did you have to go through the course to figure out that that was like the best option for you?
I had no idea, and I mistakenly thought, oh, maybe this means I'm gonna put them in a tunnel. And I one thing I knew is I didn't want to heat a tunnel. I was really clear on kind of the environmental impact of that, and also just the cost of it, not wanting to do that. I honestly didn't know what to expect. I knew I had a garage, I had a barn, so I felt lucky that I could probably figure something out. But when I learned, Emily and Linda are the teachers, and Linda and I have very similar farmhouse layouts. When I learned that she's doing the same thing and her whole program was in her cellar, I felt like I sort of hit the lottery on my old farmhouse. In my first year, I had a really small program. I only did 1,000 because I didn't, you put in the money for the bulbs. I didn't have a client base at that time. I didn't know if I would be successful. But now at this point, so it was a one table in my cellar, but at this point, my cellar is sort of a maze of folding tables and dangling lights. And I'm even expanding into kind of a second room in the cellar that I have. We'll be expanding into there this year.
Thank God for the old farmhouse. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what year did you start? When was your first year of harvesting and sales?
It would have been, I would have planted them 21, I think, and then the first ones would have bloomed that winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've done this now for 3 years, and you're
Yeah,
getting
I've
ready.
done it for a few years. Yep.
Yeah, and you're getting ready for planning for 2025. From that original 1,000 tulip bulbs, what are you up to?
I'm doing 22,000 this year. I did 10 last year, so I think like the low 20s is probably going to be my sweet spot. I'm not really looking to double necessarily every year. Who
This
knows?
was just
As of
major.
right now, I'm really looking to right size. Like I might, maybe I get up to 30 and kind of pause there. Behind me is a new shipping container, so I do have a walk-in cooler already where in the space where I process flowers. But I got another cooler set up because I need to have more bulbs cooling so I can control the temperature. So behind me, this is kind of my big addition this year. And right now I've got about, I think 11 or 12,000 tulips are planted in crates behind me, and those are getting their rooting and cooling time. These ones will sit a little bit longer. I'll start pulling these out in January, February. But then I have another load of tulips that'll show up any day, another 12,000. And then those will be like our earliest blooms, including Valentine's Day flowers.
Oh, okay. So the ones behind you you'll harvest later than the ones
They'll be later. Yep, they get planted first. They need their longer. They're kind of getting their winter right now, and then the ones that'll show up any day, they've already had their winter through being cooled at the bulb plant or processing center, and then those will just need a few weeks to root, and then we'll be
ready for Valentine's Day.
Them to the grow space.
Is that what you would call pre-chilled?
Yeah, those are the pre-cooled. Yep.
Okay. So in a way, you've kind of created a succession planting schedule, but you know when you want to harvest them and you back out the calendar.
Yeah.
I
It's
love
an
it.
amazing succession. I mean, it's really just by the week. So it's like week crates in, crates out every week, and it becomes really rhythmic. And then just about when these tulips are done, the field tulips will bloom, within a week or 10 days. So it's a really long tulip season.
So do your clients even realize that some at the beginning of the season they're getting the basement cellar forest tulips, but by the end of the season, months later, you're harvesting out of the field, or does it matter?
My steady customers know it now and they love it, and I think there's people, like, I always have new customers, and they don't necessarily understand it until, like, through my newsletter or social media, they start to get the photos and understand it more.
Wow. How are you marketing? You told me before we got on the recording that your big CSA for 2025 is already sold out. Is
Yeah.
that include tulips or is that everything else?
So I like to do my CSAs very specific for shorter windows of time. So, like, I have this 10-week winter tulip CSA. That's kind of my premier offering, my premier CSA offering of the year. And that's the one that I more than doubled my shares this year, and it's sold out in under a week, which was really
Oh
exciting.
my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, once people get the taste of the flowers, they really want them in their lives. And then I have other tulip CSAs. So I have what I call the early one, and that one's kind of March into April. And then I have the field tulip CSA. So, I counted it, and I think somebody could get 19 weeks of tulips through
That's
my
amazing.
CSA, all through it.
Well, I mean, going back to your original question about, sustaining your own business, that is 19 weeks of which maybe only 5 or 6 would have been generating income for you before you started the winter program, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's another really huge thing for me. Is, I mean, I think if someone's figured out the model where the winter off works for them and they kind of catch their breath and they do whatever, I think that's amazing. I couldn't figure out how would I get to that place where I leave teaching and leave behind that steady salary if I have to make everything happen in 6 months. Like, it just
Got it.
didn't feel for me viable. So this enables me to keep my part-time employee on. I make more revenue in February than I do in July. And I love that. That's by design. And July is now, it's kind of the hot, sweaty month here.
When you
Spring.
want to go on vacation.
Yeah, so I'm on vacation. I'm swimming with my kid. There's a music festival nearby. So just trying to build in breaks when it makes sense, because we'll get doing the tulip hustle pretty
Yeah.
close after the new year.
And you're all direct to consumer these are retail customers.
Yes, all my tulips go direct to customer. So I have my CSA. My second outlet is that I'm have this really incredible collaboration with a very well-loved bakery in Ithaca, and they asked me to keep a flower cooler in there. And so,
Wow.
here it is, the middle of November. I made up some bouquets of eucalyptus and mums before we started talking, so I'll run those in there. And so I'm not quite a year-round flower farmer in that sense, but I have that year-round outlet, and so I'll move a lot of bouquets will go through there during the week. And then I get a booth at the winter farmers market, and I just kind of go there as needed. If it feels like I'm a little more flush with stems, then I'll go there to, get to be around the community and sell some bouquets. But I don't need to go there every week in order to successfully move my stems
and to maintain your status at the farmers market.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That bakery relationship is so impressive. Like, you physically don't have to be there.
It's incredible.
But so many people who do these collabs with, lifestyle businesses like a bakery or a coffee shop
Mm-hmm.
or a fashion, retail store, the product doesn't really get the best care because it's just sitting there in the warm environment.
Yep. Yeah. So and they were adamant about the cooler, and I was worried about the cooler because if you think of the farmer's market and people come right up and they want to see and smell, and I was worried that there would be this layer of people being removed from the flowers. And I would say the first fall was maybe a little slower than I wanted it to be, but then once the tulips came in, it's just been no question. And then, like you said, they now things can hold in the cooler there, and I don't have to worry about it. There's not really any shrink involved.
Right. Because you're going every week.
Yeah, well, I go multiple times. Most weeks I go 3 times to stock the cooler in a
Wow.
typical week.
Is it like a two-door glass fronted cooler, or what kind of structure is it?
It's a one door cooler, so I can fit 2 buckets in there. Actually, I can fit 3 buckets in there, and then a lot of times if I've got a lot of product, then I'll set 1 bucket outside of the cooler, and then as the bouquets get sold, they'll just pop those in. So it kind
Wow.
of allows me to have a little overflow.
Is it all consignment, or
None
do
of it
they?
is consignment. I'm really fortunate with this arrangement. The bakers, they're just wonderful community minded people, and kind of the way that they pitched it to me was that they sort of got this leg up when they were getting going and people were carrying their bread and there wasn't a consignment piece, and so they offered those same terms to me. So I literally sell my flowers there, and then they cash me out.
Yeah. And they're making a little money too because they're probably marketing things up.
Yeah, and then I also keep it really beautiful and
Yeah.
flowers in there. So every week I'm doing 3 or 4 arrangements, and I take a lot of care of that. And I've got the places where the little bud vases go, and just kind of adding. It's a beautiful space, but really helping to keep it looking so.
Yeah, you're like the in-house florist. I
I'm like
love
the
that.
flower. When I was teaching, I called myself the flower fairy because I drive in there to be like 5:45 in the morning, and it's dark, and I'm like leaving the flowers, and then I leave, and they don't open for a little while.
Yeah, but those are baker's hours anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Well, give us a sense of your typical pricing on the CSA subscription for that night. Is it 19-week two,
Uh-huh.
or is that a combination of two
No, yeah, I
CSAs?
break them down so people can kind of add them up. So my retail price for tulips is $2.85 a stem. I want to be selling them for $3 a stem. When I look at my cost of production, I think that that's a better price. But that's just kind of where I'm at right now when I try to
Inch it up.
handle my pricing. And so, oh gosh, I should know my numbers better. So it was a 10-week, it's 10 stems a week for 10 weeks. I want to say it was 285, I think was the price of it,
Okay, that makes
which is,
sense.
an investment for somebody to just throw out a few $100s in October for something that they're not going to get until January. But like I said, I had a lot of repeat customers and a lot of people who'd been getting the tulips last year and really just want to not show up at the bakery and have them sold out because, that does happen sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah. And what you're basically addressing in that little scenario is there's no margin for you to sell wholesale to florists, I'm
Mm-hmm.
assuming. Is that
That's right.
kind of the dynamic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless those florists want to pay you $3 a stem and mark
Yeah.
it up. I mean, I guess if they have some kind of very big high-end event, they could justify that, but
Yeah.
it's not really the spot you want to be in.
It's not the spot you want to be in, which is why I think for anyone who's thinking about a forcing program, you really want to be clear that you do have that direct to customer outlet, because you could sink a lot of money into your infrastructure and your bulb cost and not be able to get it back.
Mm.
It's definitely a higher cost of production.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, I will share the PDF of this story in our show notes. Also, people should just go over to Slow Flowers Journal and read the whole issue, which I'll also share the link. But if people can see on the screen, there's a sidebar that says getting started. And you kind of walk through some your advice for helping someone get started and maybe do the thinking. Can we just talk about those? You probably can't see them on the screen, but the first one is doing your market research. You've obviously talked about that a bit, like who's going to buy these tulips, but that's sort of what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Who's going to buy these tulips? And is there somebody else growing tulips around me? Making sure that you're not, there's a going price for tulip stems. I mean, I think all of us there's a little bit of a range, but making sure you're not going to try to come in and undercut the market, or your costs are going to be so high that no one's going to be able to buy them.
And in the Ithaca region right now, are you kind of the tulip lady? I mean, is there
I am
anybody
like,
else?
so far,
It's
every
my
year,
lane. I'm staying here.
every year, my family knows I'm like, this is the winter. Someone else is going to do this, and good for them because it's amazing and
Yeah,
it's great for people. But as of right now, yes, and I
good.
think I have a really loyal customer base.
And also you've invested the years. So you've got the kind of more professional operation, and that's going to make you more productive, and you kind of
Hmm.
established
Well,
yourself already in this particular niche.
and that goes to, I think, my third point on there was about starting small because there is a lot of risk. I mean, the reality is, you know, 2 years ago, I had a really high amount of stem topple and it was frustrating and upsetting. And there are things that happen when you're forcing bulbs that don't show up in the pretty Instagram pictures. So anyone getting started, I would really recommend you do start small and just have a solid first year and get those pictures and get those happy customers, and then start planning to grow it after that.
Mhm. How did you address that issue? Was it more of a disease issue? Or?
Humidity is a really huge factor with tulips. The amount of cooling weeks and the cooling temperature, different varieties can be more or less prone. Some of it could come. There's like a boron deficiency that comes with some tulips, and they snap it like 2 or 3 inches down the stem. So there are just things like that, and that's one of the reasons my cost of production is higher. Is I factor in a much higher anticipated loss. And
Okay.
then that way I'm never short having pre-sold, about
Wow.
half of my tulips already.
Yeah, and I guess you just kind of, over time, as you said, figure out which
Yeah.
varieties are less prone to these issues, so you're curating a different selection of cultivars that you're
And
growing.
you're just getting better at dialing in your growing space. Like
Mm.
I don't have humidity issues anymore. It seemed really overwhelming, but now when I look back, I'm like, oh gosh, like I know how to fix that. And I wish I had, I just didn't know how to fix that then. And it's
Yeah. Yeah. Number 2, you said invest in education, and you talked about taking the Tulip workshop. We'll, share that information too for people. I think that it's possible to learn some of this just on YouTube videos. I heard about this tulip forcing years ago, a flower Asha Lurie, who owned Patagonia Flower Farm in southern Arizona, and she was forcing tulips in the winter in the desert, and I couldn't believe it. And she said she just taught herself from watching YouTube videos. So it's possible to do that, but there's other ways to kind of fast track your education. And you invested in going to a couple day workshop or?
It's called the Tulip Workshop. They have a 1 day in person workshop or they have an online course.
Got it.
I could not recommend it enough. Emily and Linda combined have close to 20 years experience forcing bulbs. They have seen pretty much any of the problems that you're going to be working with, and now at this point, they've had so many students that they've been able to learn and kind of develop their program around the needs of flower farmers who are learning how to do this in a variety of settings.
Yeah.
They're both also former educators, so the educational component, it's really solid, it's really high quality. And then there's a forum that we're on, and at this point we can kind of, people on there can coach one another because some of us have been doing this for
Yeah.
years, so it's really like a community, and it's fantastic. The education is incredible. There's a printed book. There's just things to it that I personally don't think I could find on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. We've got to get them involved in Slow Flowers because it sounds like we're very aligned. Before we wrap up, I want to look at number 4, where item number 4 under getting started was expect infrastructure costs. And you have addressed this a little bit. What were your first year things that you had to invest in?
Well, you have to have a cooler, and I did, so that was lucky. But a lot of people, when they're starting out in the first few years of flower farming, don't necessarily have the cooler. So you have to have that. You have to have something, shelves or tables and lights. So that's definitely a cost, especially as you scale. And then you need to have whether you're doing it hydroponically or in crates with soil, right? You have the cost of procuring those materials, the cost of like refrigeration, like running the cooler, that sort of thing. So there's definitely cost there, and I think that if you anticipate some loss in the beginning, especially, you're going to be buying bulbs that you don't sell ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also interesting that I'm just going to click over so people can see the third page of the story. It's a really long story that is heartfelt and personal, but also has a lot of practical information. So I'm so grateful that this came together. We were just chatting about, where you were at, and this emerged where I said, "Hey, would you write this?" But if you take my writing workshop, you're going to get tapped to contribute in the future. But I guess what I wanted to say back to that infrastructure investment is then, like anything, then that gets spread over multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
So your cost of goods sold is more appealing on year 2 and year 3 and year 4, at least for that initial investment in the cooler and the equipment. You've obviously got additional costs every year as you expand.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. So what's coming up for 2025 that we haven't talked about?
Well, 2025 is hopefully my year of doing more of the same. I think I'm finally
rinse and repeat.
Yes, like I'm finally at that point in my business. So that for me feels like a really big highlight, actually.
Well, we're sitting here on November 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And November 14th of 2023, Brooke Palmer was teaching English all day.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And then going home and maybe having a quick dinner with family and then going down to the cellar to check on the tulips. Your whole lifestyle has changed now. It's not like it's easier, but it's different.
It's different. It is different, but it's great. And I think that those 3 years taught me a lot about how I want to move forward having a lifestyle business, right? So I want it to be financially sustainable, but I don't want 12, 14-hour days ever. That's never going to happen for me again. I want to be a mom. I'm a mom. Yeah, so it feels really exciting, and just trying to like create this kind of rhythm throughout the year where it doesn't feel like a curse to be an almost year-round flower farmer. It feels like a gift, and there's some balance to it.
That's beautiful. Well, I wish you a really successful tulip season. The first tulips will be the ones that you sell at Valentine's Day?
Oh no, my first tulip I expect to bloom the first week of January.
Okay.
And then my CSA will start, usually I like to let them come in a little bit. It'll probably start the second week of January. But I actually have some rooting right now that will potentially be December tulips. So that's a little experiment this year to see if I can like send off some kind of like a beautiful red parrot tulip bouquets before the holidays.
Oh, I love it. Oh, those bakery customers will be grabbing those.
They'll be thrilled. Yeah.
I mean, literally anything red will sell, but
anything red will sell.
But they're used to poinsettias, and now they're going to get a beautiful cut flower. So
yes.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for sharing in so many ways. The article is really inspiring, and it's a keeper. Like, people can download it and just refer to it and kind of, follow you on your social places and look into the resources that you've shared. And this conversation has been so inspiring. We've got a whole other one we're going to do in sometime when I can come visit you and see your field in person in the summer, maybe not July, but maybe in the spring or fall, because the field grown crops we haven't even talked about.
Oh, I would love that. I would love it.
Well, thank you so much, Brooke. This has been so inspiring, and I'm really grateful that you shared your story and your expertise. And I know it's going to help people make some decisions that might change their businesses. So this was really valuable.
Thank you so much for having me, Deborah.
You bet. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.